Zoom or watching on Facebook, or later on watching on our YouTube channel. The name of that channel is called Drikung Kagyu. So you might be able to find it when you go to YouTube searching for that. Then, of course, everything that we live stream on Facebook, we usually just leave it up there. If you go to the Urban Dharma Facebook page, look for a tab where it says videos, and you click that, and all the videos, all the live streams that we have done, those videos usually remain there unless we accidentally deleted that video. But so far, that has not happened. Lots of causes and conditions come together, as with anything and everything. It requires lots of causes and conditions. It requires a lot of, in plain words, help and support from everyone. So most immediately, I would like to thank both Fabiola, who is doing this hosting, as well as Jasper in Malaysia, who is doing the more technical hosting stuff. That includes, he will try to be alert to people accidentally turning on their microphone, especially if you have a habit of humming along or, saying out loud what's going on up in your head. It's helpful to have someone like Jasper who will mute you, because you probably weren't intending for all of that to go out to the whole world. Which happens. So just be aware. And sometimes when I remind people to please mute your microphone, they end up unmuting, just like what happened a minute ago, a second ago. So sometimes you think you're just unmuted, in fact, or muted. In fact, you have just unmuted. So anyway, there is Jasper doing that for us. So thank you so much. Then, of course, subscription to Zoom, equipment that we're using, that all comes from Urban Dharma, North Carolina. We just had quickly, I want to tell you, we just had our quarterly board meeting yesterday over Zoom as well. And so, of course, as any board, the board is responsible for the center, the overall, for a number of things. One of them is the fiscal responsibility, making sure that we are being financially responsible and sustainable. And we were very happy to note that we are in a good place, not because we have, big donors giving us, lots of money, but we are in a good place in a sustainable way, because we have not made continuous fundraising, continuous kind of pushing and also saying, oh, we don't have money, we don't have money. We have really not done that. Instead, what we have emphasized is the beauty and the wonder of doing it the way of sustaining membership for people to contribute on a monthly basis or annual basis or quarterly basis, so that we can offer our programs without needing to charge a specific amount. We noted how at this time a number of organizations that different people on the board, not just Buddhists, but a number of different organizations have sent out things saying that, oh, our facility has closed and our income has gone down, our donations have gone down. We have noted that this has not happened for us, and that in large part is because we encourage people to do this sustaining membership instead of using programs to try to get income to pay our bills. As Fabiola pointed out, everyone at Urban Dharma is 100% volunteer. And so our overhead is very low in that sense. But nonetheless, rent and bills and subscription to Zoom and all of that. I'm telling you this so that you are aware that this is really due to the causes and conditions of the generosity of so many people that we can do this in this manner. And for that, we're really very grateful. So if you can, of course, we rejoice in your ability to support us in what we're doing. So if you're familiar with PayPal, the PayPal ID, I think Fabiola has shared. This PayPal ID has been a source of confusion for a lot of people. And I repeatedly have to remind Urban Dharma folks that when you're giving out this ID, you should point out to people like, it looks like an email, and in fact, it is an email address, but that's how PayPal identifies us in terms of when you go to PayPal and you say, I want to send money to so-and-so, they identify us either by our phone number or our email. So benefactors at udharmanz.com for PayPal purposes serves as the ID. So it's not the case that you send an email to benefactors at udharmanz.com and put the subject line PayPal $5, and miraculously $5 will turn up in Urban Dharma's PayPal account. It doesn't work that way. You have to go to PayPal, you have to have an account with PayPal, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, people also send checks to us. And, our address, maybe Judy or somebody can type in the address, street address, mailing address for Urban Dharma. Yesterday, I was outside on the street and outside my house, and some neighbors walked by, and one of them recognized that I'm the person teaching at Urban Dharma, and she said, "Oh, I want to send an offering for the POA program." I think she forgot the name POA, but she said, I want to send a donation. Can I, bring you a check? I said, yeah, write it out to Urban Dharma. And I said, look around, there's probably a local cause, a charity locally, especially right now, whether it's providing shelter, food, medicine for homeless people, people needing help. I said, just look for something local and please give that. And we'll be very happy to know that you're doing that. And she said, yeah, I will do that, but I want to, also give to Urban Dharma. So similarly, likewise, especially if you live some other country and it's very complicated to try to, send a donation to Urban Dharma, please look for a local cause wherever you are. Please invest in your community. Please take care of your community. And then if you can, if you have the means, you have the big aspiration, you can reach further. Yeah? So anyway, thank you so much. As they say, we're all in this together. Or the Vietnamese Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh says, the only alternative to coexistence is co-non-existence. So that statement is no more powerfully resonant than right now, to recognize that if we don't think in terms of coexistence, not just among human beings, but across all different species on this planet, if we don't think in terms of figuring out coexistence, then the only alternative to that is co-non-existence. Then of course, on the individual basis, sacrifices have to be made for coexistence. So to whatever degree individually you can make a sacrifice for the sake of coexistence, that's very helpful. But of course, don't ever sacrifice someone else. Let them make that choice. We don't have the moral authority to make that choice for others, to say, oh, well, for coexistence, we have to sacrifice you. Or at least I hope, you will not be put in that situation. And then, of course, when you get to choose, don't choose that, choose, if you can, a little bit of sacrifice on our side. And that can come in so many forms. Sometimes it's sacrificing our time, sacrificing or offering. Sometimes it's offering our time, offering our attention, offering our convenience, which means being willing to be inconvenienced. And if something is going on, something good is going on that is available to other people, and somehow your circumstance is such that you're not able to enjoy it, don't be bitter, don't be sour, rejoice in other people having that option. I was hearing on BBC right before we started this morning, as I was getting my coffee ready. There was a report about how in Spain, in Madrid maybe, the local government have been moving these huge screens and taking them to neighborhoods and having movie nights, because a lot of people who live in apartments have balconies in the style of the buildings there. So people would come out on the balcony and have this shared experience, of watching. But instantly when I heard that in my mind, I thought of people who would be complaining because, the screen wasn't put in a position that they could see. See, I guess maybe my mind went that way. In my defense, I guess I'm just making excuses, is that I often would encounter things like that. Like when somebody is doing something good or attempting to do something good, then complaints will come here or there. It wasn't good enough. It wasn't perfect enough. It wasn't, and that's the mind that is incapable of stepping outside of ourselves. Immediately thinking in terms of how I did not get that advantage, how I did not get the best seat, how I did not get the best view, how I did not get the best sound. If we cannot step out of ourself as that reference point, if we cannot rejoice in the good that we see around us, even if it is not happening for us, then our chances of experiencing happiness is always going to be so narrow. It's always going to be so narrow because we are so narrow. When there's so much that is beautiful, that is wonderful, that is good, that is happening. But because our reference point, is just I, me, and mine. It's not even that we are necessarily acting in classically what's identified as egotistical way. It's just a very subtle way in which everything comes back, and necessarily everything comes back to kind of me, as in, my mind is what makes all of this, intelligible to me. But that can so quickly trap us into this I, me, mine. That if the good is not happening for me, to me, then it's not good, and that makes, our capacity to experience happiness and to share happiness very tight, very limited. So that's why, Buddha says, bodhicitta is so important. Bodhicitta in the two aspects, on the two levels of absolute bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. Absolute bodhicitta is the wisdom mind that understands emptiness, or stated in another way, interdependent arising and ceasing, interdependent origination, or emptiness, meaning lack of fixity as the nature of reality. So that's absolute bodhicitta. Relative bodhicitta, love and compassion, that is love and compassion that moves us to committing to becoming Buddhas for the benefit of others. And so relative bodhicitta foregrounds love and compassion with wisdom in the background. Absolute bodhicitta foregrounds wisdom with love and compassion in the background. Because in absolute bodhicitta, when we finally see the nature of reality, directly perceive nature of reality, then the love and compassion are natural radiance of this realization. Right? We don't have to contrive the love and compassion that arises when we truly recognize the nature of reality. So in both levels of bodhicitta, it's basically wisdom one side, love and compassion on the other side. And so this, holding to bodhicitta has to be the root of our practice and the foundation of our practice. So likewise, today, whether I'm the one giving these instructions or you who is receiving instructions, we should all hold to bodhicitta. We should all remember bodhicitta. We should try our best to do it from the position of bodhicitta. And it's not easy. And as you know, in the Lojong series, we talked about this. You will feel kind of like a hypocrite when you say the bodhicitta prayers. Okay? You're like, well, that's intellectually I'm saying this, and ritually I'm saying this, habitually I'm saying this, but I don't really operate like this, if I'm really honest. And I say, well, welcome to the club. This is the club of feeling like a fraud. But there is, authentic frauds, or at least feeling like a fraud on your way to becoming authentic. And that's necessarily, the feeling that naturally is going to be there because we're not there yet, So on the journey to being authentic, on the journey to actualizing bodhicitta, of course, we're going to feel like hypocrites, sometimes more strongly than other times. But it's good. That means the vow is working. That's why we take vows. That's why we make commitments. Because the power of the vow or the commitment is not some kind of magic that miraculously protects us from unskillful actions. So the power of taking vows, making commitments, is that when we act unskillfully, because if the power is working, then when we act unskillfully, there will be enough awareness and memory to remind us, oh, this is not what I committed to. This is not what I vowed to practice. And so then, beneficial regret arises. In Buddhist psychology, regret is not necessarily a universal negative. In fact, regret and shame, Buddha use these words. It says that there are positive aspects to regret and shame. And we have to skillfully use these feelings, right, in order to move us further along the path. Yeah. So anyway, we will begin now more formally. I will read out the opening prayers, If you know, you can say it on your end. If you don't know, just listen. And maybe even if you know, maybe the translation, since I'm going to use the English, then here and there, some words will be different, some expression, some phrasing will be different. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in a state of the most perfect and precious awakening. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in a state of the most perfect and precious awakening. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in a state of the most perfect and precious awakening. Thus, until I achieve awakening, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So again, this morning or this evening, for some of you who are in Malaysia and Singapore on the other side of the world, what we want to do is I want to share with you this practice called the source of all auspiciousness. And the source of all auspiciousness, Dele Kunjung in Tibetan, is a cleansing offering practice. Cleansing offering is a translation of the Tibetan for sangchö. Sangchö. Another name for sangchö, and sometimes they are slightly different, but for our purposes, they are the same. Is no sang, or sangchö. So sang is to cleanse, to purify. Here is offering, so sangchö. So we translate as cleansing offering. No sang, no sang, no is contamination. So then it's the cleansing of contamination. So here with these two names, for basically, I would say, the same type of practice, whether it's called sangchö or no sang. It does show the two basic kind of functions of this particular type of practice. So for both, whether you call it no sang or sangchö, this category of practice, such as like, deity yoga is one category of practice. And then there's many different texts for the different deities and deity yoga. Then likewise, this category of practice called sang, in some texts they are called sangchö, so cleansing offering. In other texts, it's called no sang, which is the sang, the cleansing of contamination. In both cases, the word sang is there. And if some of you are familiar with the Shambhala Buddhist community, mostly in North America, they use the word, another word, which is ha sang. Ha sang is the sang of the deities, of the ha sang. Anyway, this word sang is to cleanse. It is to cleanse. So then primarily, this type of practice utilizes smoke, and more specifically, smoke from burning aromatic plants. So the aromatic smoke, good smelling smoke, using that as the medium of cleansing. To cleanse what? So as the title of no sang indicates, is to cleanse no. No is generally, you can translate that as contamination. So then, contamination. Now, no sang, or the cleansing of contamination using aromatic smoke. If you look around the world, immediately you'll see that it's a fairly universal kind of practice in terms of, in the sense of using smoke that is derived from certain plants, certain herbs, certain resin, certain wood, using that smoke to cleanse, to remove contamination. That's a fairly universal. So I think there's something that transcends, right? No matter what culture, no matter what spiritual tradition, human beings discovered the power of aromatic smoke, the power of smoke coming from significant plants in having an effect on human beings. And I think, if you want to be looking at kind of evolutionary biology from that perspective, or the psychology of that, maybe we can say that, as a species, human beings, for us, the discovery of fire, right, by our ancestors, our human ancestors, was probably the most important discovery by human beings. Because discovering fire and how to use fire has probably ensured the success of the human species. And so for human beings, at least, fire, and when there's fire, then there will be smoke. Or when there's smoke, there's fire. I think that's but with fire comes smoke. So I think when we smell wood burning, almost in a way, right, it triggers this very deep-seated, and maybe even, on the DNA level, right, very deep-seated sense of well-being, safety, and comfort, when we smell wood burning, because, our ancestors discovered this, and we became safe, right? Then, of course, I know certain aromatic plants, have certain properties. So in the same way, Tibetans were doing this type of ritual, this type of practice, even before the Buddha Dharma arrived in Tibet. And then it is said that when the Buddha Dharma arrived in Tibet, and especially under the leadership of such sublime beings like Guru Rinpoche or Pema Sambhava and others, they were able to kind of skillfully absorb local elements, such as this use of sang to cleanse. They were able to take that ritual form, take that common practice, and then adapt that or infuse that with a Buddhist meaning. Not necessarily subverting in this case, not necessarily subverting. In some cases that happens, such as even in India, where there were sacrificial rituals done by other traditions of like ritually sacrificing animals, and in some cases even humans. Buddhist tradition sometimes borrowed that ritual form, but subverted that. And instead of sacrificing animals or sacrificing humans, then symbolically sacrificing that which is supposed to receive the human sacrifice or the animal sacrifice. So that's an active reversal. As a form of skillfully transforming local practices. In the case of Tibet, in the case of sang, it's not so much a complete reversal, but building on the native Tibetan sense of contagion or contamination, building on that native sense of contamination, Guru Rinpoche then and others, all those who were involved in the transmission and the establishment and the growth of the Buddha Dharma in Tibet, they were able to work with local ritual forms and to transform and to further enhance and to bring out what we would say the deeper significance of what is commonly known and practiced. We have one example like this, at least one that I can think of immediately, that the Buddha himself is said to have done. This is the story, some of you are familiar with, of the sutra or the sutta found in the Pali Canon, probably also in Sanskrit form, but I don't remember the name. But in the Pali form, this is called the Sigalovada Sutta. So there was a young man, Sigala, I think that was his name, who before his father died, his father said to him, I want you to promise me to continue our family tradition of, since you are going to be, like the head of the household from now on, I want you to promise me that after my death, without fail every morning, you have to continue this ritual at the river, where at the river, he makes these ritual offerings to the 6 directions. So you scoop up water from the holy river, usually the Ganga River. You scoop up water and you pour out and you say, oh, to the eastern direction, I make this offering. To the western direction, I make this offering. To the southern direction, I make this offering. To the northern direction, I make this offering. To the upper direction, I make this offering. To the lower direction, I make this offering. And so Father said, you have to do this. You have to promise me. So the son said, okay, I will continue this. So then it said that he continued this ritual. Then one day, one morning, as is with the Buddha's daily schedule, after his early meditation, it is said that he then would, every morning, he would then direct his attention to his surroundings and using the power of his ability to see whatever he wants to see clearly all the causes and conditions. It said that every morning after his own meditation, he would radiate his kind of radar, you could say, to detect and see who is ready and right to hear the Dharma and to be transformed. And on that particular morning, he saw Sigala. And he said, I'm going to go to him. In fact, I'm going to go to him now, because now he's at the river and he's doing this. So the Buddha gets to the river and sees him. And he lets him finish. And then when the young man comes up and he said, young man, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm doing this. And he said, and why? And he said, well, my father. And then the Buddha said, but do you really know what your father was trying to teach you before he passed? He said, well, that we have to continue our family traditions. The Buddha used that opportunity to say, no, there's a deeper meaning to what you're doing. And whereby there, the Buddha gave a discourse, a beautiful discourse on what are our mutual obligations to each other in a healthy society. How is a student to relate to a teacher, and how is a teacher to relate to a student? How is an employer to relate to an employee, and how is an employee to relate to an employer? How parents are to relate to their children, and how children should relate to their parents, and how husband should relate to wife, wife to husband, and friends. So all these, relationships that we have as a social being, Buddha says, this is the real meaning of, oh, I make offerings and pay homage to the Eastern direction. I make offerings and homage to the, Western direction. And so then he said to Sigala, then from now on, every morning when you do this, let it be a time where you remember all of these healthy social obligations and responsibilities, and basically the notion of reciprocity between two people. And so that is like the Buddhist kind of ideal model of how a society can function harmoniously, can function skillfully for the benefit of all, for coexistence. So that's one example, even during the Buddha's time, where he gave kind of the Dharma layer grafted on top of a cultural local layer. So likewise with the Sang offering, this is what's going on. So to remove contamination, no. And so what are the contaminations? First, there is a layer of contamination or an understanding of contamination that is based on every local area's indigenous sense of what contaminates. To contaminate and to pollute, right, is to compromise the natural integrity of what has been contaminated, what has been polluted, right? That's the basic definition of when we say, what is the problem of contamination? Well, the problem of contamination is that which has been contaminated originally had its own power, its own integrity, its own pristine nature, but due to the presence of now contamination, that innate power, that innate integrity, that innate virtue can no longer function effectively. So from a Buddha Dharma's point of view, then the contamination that we're talking about is confusion or ignorance. That's the ultimate contamination. You could say that's the secret contamination, which is the lack of rikpa, the lack of wisdom awareness, or losing that. And as a result, instead of that, then we say the twofold mistake of thinking that there is essence or self to persons, and there is essence or self to phenomena. So, in other words, not seeing the essencelessness or the selflessness of persons and phenomena, then gave rise to the 5 afflictive emotions, the kleshas, that then in turn give rise to the 84,000 kleshas, afflictive emotions. So that's the secret level contamination. Out of that, secret in the sense of most essential, most essence level contamination. And so as a result of that, so that you can call dripa. As a result of that, we begin to create negative karma. Because when we don't see things as they are, but instead we see things based on our own confused projections, then unskillful actions are going to arise. And unskillful actions will lead to unpleasant results. And that's those unskillful actions is what we call, in Tibetan, is called dikpa, meaning like misdeeds, negative deeds, harmful actions, dikpa. So dikpa, when there is dikpa, when there is negative causes, there will be unpleasant results to arise. That I would call the inner contamination. Then when this inner contamination in the form of negative, unskillful causes, when that's present, then that will give rise to outer contamination. And outer contamination is when the proximate causes of suffering turns up. That means the contributing conditions for suffering to be experienced, they will turn up. So they will turn up in many forms. They will turn up as, like right now. In fact, from this perspective, we say the coronavirus threat and the consequences of this threat is the outer manifestation, is the outer contamination that is brought about by the inner contamination, dikpa, the negative deeds, unskillful actions, which is brought about by the secret contamination, which is not seeing things as they are, and instead coming under the power of the kleshas. So these 3 levels of contamination. So outer contamination then can lead, can be all sorts of things, like virus contagion, bacteria, or always meeting adverse conditions. Like sometimes you feel like, no matter where you go, nobody likes you. You don't get along with people. And conditions seem to conspire against you. That is outer contamination. Or going or living in a place where you feel like things are just not right. All those are outer contamination. Then culturally, I think we should say this too, I should say this too. Culturally, every culture has its own also native sense of what is outer contamination. So that might be what we now call superstition. So this idea that, walking under leather, that's negative, or black cat, or so that's, different cultures have their different sets of what we might call superstition. But nonetheless, these superstitions probably arose due to some experiences that people have had. And likewise, Tibetans have their own sense of like. So in this text, there is two terms that we left untranslated, like the contamination or the pollution of me and no, me and no. Later we will see. Me is a specific type of contamination that is the result of, and this is the result of murder of kin, of family. No, in its broader sense, it just means any and all types of contamination of this nature, of like the contamination that causes illness, the contamination that causes deterioration of wealth, contamination that causes discord in the family, in the neighborhood, all those, you can call all of that no. But no has an earlier meaning, a more specific meaning, and that it has to do with the contamination that arises from sexual impropriety. That means sexual behavior that led to a disruption of the balance and the harmony of whether the individual, the family, the neighborhood. Whereas the me is the contamination that arises from the harming and finally the killing of kin, of family. So from here you can see, right, the native indigenous sense of that society being particularly concerned about these two basic types of contamination, or you could say a rupture, right? A disturbance of harmony and well-being of a community. So me and no are, in the most narrow sense, is referring to those two types of contamination. But the word no now has taken on a broader meaning, not just about like sexual kind of offenses, so to say, as in it offends the community. So the types of things that are described there are like incest, and particularly the birth of children due to incestuous relationships. Those things are considered extremely contaminating in that society, and I think many human societies, among human societies, there's that sense, and the harming and the killing of kin, of family. So this is me and no. So then the other two words is dikpa and dripa. Dripa, in the Buddhist sense, dripa is talking about the two obscurations that leads to a belief in the self of persons and the self of phenomena. And those are the two obscurations, dripa. Then, culturally for Tibetans, dripa also has the meaning of some kind of spiritual dirt, you could call that, that adheres to us and harms the protective gods that we naturally have. So I think the language of protective gods, perhaps we can understand today as like our defense system, our basic kind of energy and health and defense system. It's understood as like a collection of protector deities, protector gods. Later in the text, you'll see different names, different persons and groups of beings identified with the job of protecting the different domains of our domestic life. And I think that's entirely up to you, how literal you want to take this notion of gods and deities. But I think at the very basic level, it's talking about there is a natural properties and energies and integrity to everything, every object in that sense. So maybe it's not sentient necessarily, but every object has its own kind of integrity. But when that integrity is compromised, then things fall apart. When things fall apart, then that's what we label as negative, unpleasant, suffering. So sang is a practice to remove contamination on all three levels, outer, inner, and secret. So let me pause here. I know I have thrown out a lot out there for you. Probably if you can go back and listen, later, that might be helpful. I know I've thrown out a lot because we don't have a lot of time. And this topic can be a rather big one, especially for those of us, who are not native Tibetans. Well, I'm not, So I think for us, we kind of need to know a little bit more, right? What are the underlying principles of this practice? And then we can connect with it in a more authentic way. I've said that there are two ways, to relate to something that is not like natively ours. And we want to be careful of these two ways. We are taking one and not the other. One is, I would call, to ape, to mimic. The other one is to emulate. We should emulate what Tibetans have done with the Buddha Dharma. I don't think we should ape or mimic. When we ape or mimic, then we are superficially taking on all the external trappings. Then in the end, we are just kidding ourselves, and we might even be kind of making fun of, it's sort of like these days, especially in like the US, it's unacceptable, right, to appropriate, like to dress up, as like some other culture, some other, and on Halloween, and kind of disrespecting in that sense. Likewise, I think with practicing these practices, there's the danger of just mimicking, of aping, of like, going native, so to say. That's not Buddha Dharma. Buddha Dharma is about emulating. So I think we need to do a little bit more work in order to figure out, so what is the feeling, what is the meaning, what is the essence of what we're doing, and how to incorporate that in our own practice. So now I'll pause because I would like to quench some thirst and rest the throat a little bit. But maybe you have some questions and you can ask. If you're shy to speak, you can type in the chat, and maybe Fabiola can read those questions there. Then those of you on Facebook, I will try to go look over there to see if you have any questions.
Dr. Lai, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I am wondering about the difference between the smoke and the sir offering, or the song and the sir.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and maybe I'm confused, I'm very confused, it's not I think, but I think that we're doing a smoke offering today, which is different from, and there's a song and a sir, and one is smoke, which I think is the sir, and then there's another one that's song. And song, I think, has to do with burning of other substances other than herbs and food and things like this. But
What we're doing today is what the instructions for today is sang.
okay.
So sang is for cleansing. Sur, the other one that you mentioned, sur is for nourishing.
Okay.
Sur is the offering of food aroma to the beings that, especially to the beings that have recently passed on and are still in the bardo state. Right? So the primary recipients of sur, right? And sur is the offering of the aroma of food, because in the sutras, especially like in the Abhidharma, it is said that these beings in the intermediate realm, they still crave food, but when they are in this disembodied stage, they have left behind this body, they have not acquired a new body, they feed on aroma, they feed on smells. Right? So in Tibetan practice, in fact, when someone has passed away, they will do sur 3 times a day, corresponding to the 3 meals of the day. Breakfast, they will offer sur. Lunch, offer sur. Dinner, offer sur. And do this for 21 days, do this for 49 days. So sur is the offering of nourishment. Sang is the offering of cleansing. So fundamentally, actually very different in terms of like what are the goals of these 2 types of offerings. Superficially, they look like it's the same thing because you're making smoke, but actually sur should be the smell of food. So for Tibetans, basically it's the burning of roasted barley flour mixed with what's called the 3 whites and the 3 sweets. And the 3 whites is butter, ghee, and curd. The 3 sweets is honey, molasses, and sugar. So that's sur. In fact, for sur, they say don't use charcoal because that kind of is not food smell. So then you're like, wait, so how do I, make this smoke? Usually they use incense because they say at least incense, it's not like charcoal. So it's okay to use incense, and then you add the sur substance. Sang is to cleanse, and this is what we are doing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So there's a question on Facebook that says, basically it says, if you live in an apartment and can you offer just a small amount of smoke? Oh, absolutely. In fact, there are some for the convenience of people who live in small spaces and just for convenience, they make incense sticks that are for sang. Which means, generally any incense stick can be used for sang. But if you want it to be more sang, then it should have a higher mix of like juniper, cedar, these evergreens. So then there's also a formula that has become very popular called the Rivo Sangchö formula. Riwo Sangchö is a type of sang. It's a specific text that is very popular among Kagyu and Nyingma, also Nyingma Kagyu communities of practice, Karma Kagyu especially among Kagyus, and Drikung Kagyu too, I suppose, but a lot of Nyingmas, and that's a term discovered in Sikkim. And that Riwo Sangchö, there is a particular formula, and so various incense makers now make these incense sticks that are called like the Riwo Sangchö formula. In contemporary times, perhaps the most famous of Riwo Sangchö formula, because again, there are different formulas even for the Riwo Sangchö sang incense. The most famous one is the one that the previous Dorjé Rinpoche is said to have mixed together and provided a particular incense maker. So that incense maker, that family is still very well known, and people try to buy it from that family because they have the original mix that Dorjé Rinpoche is said to have put together. But anyway, generally speaking, if you're looking for, you can just buy these incense stick. So like Gyalwang Rinpoche, for example. So Gyalwang Rinpoche, Kyabje Gyalwang Rinpoche is the main Drikung Lama that strongly encourages his students to do sang offering, this cleansing offering, and particularly the source of auspiciousness that we're looking at today. And when Rinpoche does it, again, I mean, you could do sang outside, with a big like smoke and big gathering of people. And Tibetan homes, Bhutanese homes, Sikkimese, everybody in their homes, outside there is a sang burner shaped kind of like a stupa, but it's for offering sang. Obviously, a lot of smoke. But then if you live in an apartment, if you live in a house, like even me living in the house inside, I use a little, hope you can see, like a little bowl like this, put a bed of ashes from incense or from your fireplace, light a little piece of incense, put it straight down, flat down, which I'll do. And then you can buy some powdered incense, and then you just sprinkle on top of this segment of incense that you lay down on this. Often better to have like 2 or 3 of this, because when you sprinkle the incense powder on top, you have to experiment, and then you can figure out how much to sprinkle. Because if you sprinkle too much, you will kind of kill the little amber that is burning. So you sprinkle on top, and then smoke is created. Yeah. So amount, doesn't matter. Bodhicitta is what's going to magnify the cleanse. Another thing common, I think, cause of confusion is that I think some communities, they call all of these, whether it's sur, whether it's sang, they say fire offerings. That I think has created some blurring of categories, and people are confused. Oh, it's all fire offerings, fire offerings. Actually, fire offerings are a third type of burning offering that is called jinsek. And jinsek fire offerings. In India, they're called homa, H-O-M-A, or yagna, or homa. And these, at least from a Vajrayana point of view, this jinsek or fire offering are things that only to be done when you have completed, like say you enter into a retreat of a deity practice of the highest yoga tantra system, say you finish your Jaka Samvara accumulations. You've done like a year or 3 months or 6 months, and you've accumulated, 400,000 recitations. Then at the end of that, you have to do a jinsek. And the jinsek is a big fire in this case. And it's not smoke. You're not creating smoke, but you are offering into the fire. The fire is visualized as the deity himself that will be receiving these offerings. So 5 types of different grains, lots and lots, the list of fire offering. So then there are fire offerings for pacifying, fire offerings for increasing, fire offerings for magnetizing, fire offerings for destroying. And those are very complex, generally speaking, jinsei are very complex rituals. And in fact, not to be done, not to be performed by ordinary people and not intended for daily performance. Whereas sang and sur are very basic ritual forms for Tibetans. And just about anyone can do it. You don't need to have qualified yourself by having done 400,000 recitation of this or that mantra. This is something that is to be done, can be done by anyone and everyone. Sang. So let's see.
Dr. Lai, there's another question.
Go ahead.
Somebody says, I've been told to do the sang offering from sunrise till noon, but to refrain from doing the sang offering after 12 noon.
There are some traditions that say that. There are some lamas who say that. As well, I have seen very respected, reputable lamas doing Riwo Sangchö in the afternoon. So I think there are different opinions out there. So if you really are, concerned about this question, I suggest you don't take my answer. You ask a lama that you trust. But I can tell you there is different opinions on this matter. I've also read in some anthropological writings that some nomads have this belief that if you do sang, like later in the day, like in the late afternoon or evening, sometimes you might cause the death of livestock. So if you have a bunch of yaks that you're concerned about, then better not to do sang in the evening. Generally speaking, sang is done in the morning. And this is also to do with, when the first fire, the ember that's burning throughout the night. And in the morning, mom will restart that fire. And once that fire is started, some of that coal from that fire is taken to the sang offering structure. And then sang is offered. So this is like a nice way to start the day. Like the very fire, right, that you use to maintain your life, right? Breakfast, lunch, keeping warmth, all of that. The very fire, every morning, first you do a cleanse. And so I think there's also like psychologically why you do a cleanse early in the morning. That's very good way to start. So I think this has also something to do with the actual circumstance of how this sang smoke is created and offered. So you can do it in the morning. That's really good. It's when the air is still fresh, when everything is just waking up. That's a good time to do sang.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So now let's look at the text. So if you look at the text, then I think depending on depending on the edition that you have and also the different translation, like I said, you know, I gave a link. We gave a link to the one that I use at the tibetanspirit.com website. But you can also find it elsewhere, especially in Gachen Institute's website. They also have the translation available, but slightly different than the English. But anyway, in the version that I'm using, probably around page 35, around there, so at the end, this is actually an appendix. It's called the 6 mantras with 6 mudras. This is a set of very standard mantras and mudras and some recitation that is used in many other contexts to bless and to consecrate and to magnify offerings. So here they are used to prepare the offerings. And so this is an appendix. And so actually, if you want, you begin this offering here. Of course, as with any practice, you begin with taking refuge, generating bodhicitta. Then you come here and you do the 6 mantras with 6 mudras. Sometime else, you know, we can go into details. Yeah, talking about the 6 mantras with 6 mudras and show you how to do the mudras. Even how to do the mudras, there is like variations across the board. One thing I want to point out is recently a friend, a Dharma friend who does translations, asked me about what I thought about this line. And when I looked at it again, I realized that, oh, I think I have mistranslated, and others, a lot of others have also sort of mistranslated this line. It's not something that is wrong, but it's not literally what is being said. So on page 37, starting with Namo, this is after the 6 mantras and 6 mudras have been given. Then it says Namo, which means homage, by the power of my wishes. And then it says the power of the Tathagata's blessings and the power of the Dharma Dhatu, in order to make offerings to the noble ones and to benefit sentient beings. All aims and wishes we might have, all those whatever that is suitable in all the worlds without exception, may they arise without hindrances. So this is a verse that basically says, you know, by the power of my wishes. Here, more specifically, it's not just any wish, it's not just any desire. Here is more specifically, by the power of my desire to make offerings to the noble ones and to benefit sentient beings. So that's the first, you could say, the cause. How is this offering going to be successful? First, you have to be sincerely wanting to do this. So that's the first power. The second power here, which is translated as the power of the Tathagata's blessings, that I think is not the original meaning of this line. Here in the Tibetan, Deshin Shepe. Deshin Shepe is Tathagatas, Buddhas. Jin Top Dang. Top is power. Jin, here, I think it has been misread as Jinlap, a contraction of Jinlap. Jinlap is blessings. But here the Jin is Jinpa, generosity. Not Jinlap, it's Jinpa, generosity. So here it's saying, by my desire to practice generosity, to give, to offer, by the power of Buddha's generosity. And what that means is, well, Buddhas have perfected generosity as the first of 6 perfections. So my own desire to practice generosity, combined with the power of the Buddha's generosity, combined with the power of the Dharma Dhatu, meaning the realm of reality, may this offering be successful. That's what it's saying here. So, and there's a deeper meaning here, you know. My desire, my wish to practice generosity, you could say that's my mind. Buddha's power of generosity, perfection of generosity, Buddha's mind, Dharma Dhatu, the nature of reality, all 3 are inseparable. So now, even something as simple as this, we are given some mind instructions, some nature of mind instructions. But in the context of making offerings. So if my mind, if my intention, my desire can be purified of confusion and therefore magnified, fully kind of activated, then it can be like the Buddha's generosity, Buddha's mind, which is no different from the nature of reality itself, from the Dharma Dhatu itself. This is what it's saying here. Now, following, and I want to encourage you to look on YouTube. Gyalwang Rinpoche, Kyabje Gyalwang Rinpoche has given teachings on this text, and it's available on YouTube. You should go watch that and listen to those teachings. That's like from his experience. And he is someone who practices this every day without missing a day. So there's so much you can learn from Rinpoche. So following the way Rinpoche has taught this text, we begin by looking at, let's see, page 31, at least in the version that I have. And it says, afflictions, habitual propensities, and faults and defects are purified. Let's see if everyone can find that section, that page. Go to where it says, afflictions, habitual propensities, and faults and defects are purified. All defects from the veil of samaya violations, misfortunes, and negativities are done with. Yeah, you all found that part? So we begin there because so this is towards the end of the text, because there it tells us what is the goal and what is it that we need to cleanse. In the context of current situation, while the medical experts are racing to find drugs that will counteract it, and then hopefully antivirals and immunization, all of that, we say that's the outer level. And then we also know inner level, there are things that we need to take care of. If you are a Dharma practitioner, you will know as important and as helpful as outer managing of the situation is needed and necessary. We also have to remove the inner cause. And then we also have to remove the secret causes. So this section tells us what these inner things are that we need to address. What are the secret contaminations that we need to address? So we begin by looking at this text here. So it says afflictions. These are kleshas, nyomon. So these are afflictive emotions. These are emotions that afflict, emotions that cause suffering. Then you say, what about like love? Love will still cause suffering if we don't have wisdom. So love that is lacking in wisdom, and even compassion that is lacking in wisdom, will still become a basis for suffering. So that's why they're called afflictive emotions. They're emotions that cause pain. And they are afflictive emotions as long as subject and object, the division between subject and object is like stubbornly there. I love you. Once you have I love you, then it doesn't take long when you go, but do you love me? Suffering, it's churned out already. The minute you go, I love you, then as long as things are going relatively well, fine, but it's a time bomb, because then inevitably it'll be like, do you love me? And then like, yeah, but not as much as I do. Then, on and on and on and on and on. I hate you. You hate me. All of that. So it says here, by doing this offering, afflictions, meaning kleshas, then habitual propensities, bakchak, habitual propensities are whenever we do things, we create karma, there is the effect that will come from the karmic causes that we have created. So that's one consequence of karmic actions. They will produce karmic results sometime in the future. Future could be next hour, next day, next month, next year, next lifetime. So that's one consequence of karmic actions. Another consequence of karmic action is it also creates a propensity. It creates this habit energy. Right? In Chinese, it's called 习气. That means like habitual qi, energy. This habitual energy can be positive and can be negative, actually. So when you practice generosity, for example, the more you practice generosity, the more you are in the habit of being generous. Conversely, if you keep, getting irritable and not, do something about it, chances are you will get more and more irritable. That's habitual propensities. And so here is talking about these negative habitual propensities and the kleshas and faults. Faults are, so kleshas will create a klesha pattern, habitual propensities. This habitual pattern will then more easily give rise to faults and defects. So this is like 3 points in the continuum, in the line of how negative karma, negative actions become concrete. It arises from kleshas that puts in place a habit pattern, which then become very effective machines of producing faults and defects. So all of this, may they be purified. Then next all defects from the veil of samaya violations, misfortunes, and negativities are done with. Here's samaya violations. Samaya is an issue in the context of Vajrayana practice. It means commitment, it means bond. And then I think in a lot of Tibetan Buddhist centers, this notion of samaya can be quite a tricky subject. A lot of times, I will be honest, what I observe is samaya talk is used as a way to control. It's used as a way to exert control and to abuse each other. At a drop of a pin, you'll be threatened with, samaya violation. Oh, you're breaking your samaya. Oh, you're breaking your samaya. Oh, you're breaking your samaya. It's like you have to tiptoe through everything. It is true that the Tantras warn about the importance of protecting your samaya, your commitment. And then there's a list of do's and don'ts related to samaya. So there is the broader and more fundamental meaning of samaya, and then there are the specific trainings related to keeping samaya. And it is true that when samaya is broken, it leads to a lot of pain. So the most important samaya, in the broader sense of samaya, is the commitment of the samaya to actualizing bodhicitta. Then in the context of Vajrayana, that is primarily done, or the actualizing of bodhicitta comes through training with the guidance of a guru, at least a teacher, a Vajrayana guru. And that relationship between a Vajrayana guru and disciple is sacred, which also means that it can be volatile and it can be challenging. And so much emphasis is placed on not breaking the samaya there. But I think the way that has been emphasized, in my humble opinion, has led to very unhealthy situations. I think we have presented this the wrong way, that it has turned into an issue of control and fear rather than an issue grounded in love. Again, Kyabje Gajin Rinpoche will, in his very direct and seemingly simple way, he will say, he says, samaya is love. The love that we have for each other as teacher and student, the care, this bond, we need to really treasure and guard. Don't let gossip, misunderstanding, little mood swings, expectations, all that stuff compromise this care. And this care is not like samsaric care. This care is based on bodhicitta. This care, this love between a teacher and a student, and then among the students of the same teacher, extending from there, needs to be kept sacred and from the heart, not out of fear, not out of threats, not out of intimidation, not out of control, but genuine care. Because we are all committed to actualizing bodhicitta, and we do not want anything to come in the way of that. So it has to come from there. And so it says here, this veil of samaya violations. When we have compromised that trust, whether through suspicion, through fickle mind, through all sorts of things. So watch out for all of that, in other words. Don't let it compromise. So that's why sometimes it's also said, one skillful way to navigate that is don't go broadcasting who you consider as your guru. Because that's a personal matter. Nobody needs to know. Much less, advertising on Facebook. Oh, so-and-so is my guru, so-and-so is my guru. When you do that, what is it really about? It's like telling the world, oh, look who I'm with, right? It's like people in the mundane scene of dating, right? You want to be seen with a good-looking whoever, right? And parade around. Don't let your samaya with your guru deteriorate into that kind of nonsense. Then you are inviting trouble. Keep it intimate, as in, this is not for public eyes. Then way less obstacles will come if you don't go broadcast. Oh, my guru is this, my guru is that. Just shut up. Keep it in your heart. The other thing is like, pictures, pictures of your guru, your lama, prominently displayed, whether on your Facebook, or on your shrine, In fact, one time we had someone way early when we started Urban Dharma. Apparently this has annoyed them for a while. So finally one day when they really couldn't take it anymore and they wanted me to know. So in the list of complaints that they have about Urban Dharma, one of them was like, why don't you have any pictures of any lamas? I was asked that. I said, oh, I didn't know that was a requirement. Of course, then this person is like implying that I only want people to think of me as the lama. Well, maybe I want that, who knows, hard to know about our motivations. But I said, I don't think traditionally it's necessarily there. And of course, they're like, what do you mean? Like you go to any center, it's there. I said, yeah, that's like, thanks to like modern photography, suddenly pictures of lamas are turning up in every place. For 1,000 years in Tibet, there were no pictures of lamas. In fact, very rarely do you even get someone to do a portrait of the lama and paint it into a tanka and hang it there. They don't. In fact, only time it's done is when the lama is getting, to the point that they know, he's going to pass and they want, maybe a picture, and then maybe it's painted. But even when it's painted, it's painted to be used when the lama has passed on. So this business of putting pictures of lamas, I'm not saying you cannot, I'm just saying, whatever you adopt, please adopt skillfully. And don't let it deteriorate into samsaric stuff. Yeah. So anyway, I digress. Yeah. As for the faults and defects of tainted body, speech, and mind, and so this is what we are trying to remove. The 10 non-virtues. All the different ways through physical, verbal, mental, emotional actions that we create suffering for ourselves and others. All of that. By the truth of the clearing from this ritual of washing with cleansing smoke, then obscuring veils like mist that envelops mountain peaks, weakening forces like woodbine that overpowers treetops, and taints in samaya like taints in samaya, like solar and lunar eclipses. So these three images are given, like mist covering mountains so that you cannot see that it's there. Or like woodbine overpowering treetops. In the South, we have, in the US, we have what's known as kudzu, a Japanese import, I think. It can grow, like a foot a day. If you're not careful, it takes over everything. And then lunar and solar eclipses, the samaya taints. These are all cleared away by the auspicious interdependence that is this ritual of washing with cleansing smoke. Weaken samayas, evil deeds, meaning this deeds, actions that harm ourselves, harm others, obscurations, and the habitual propensities, and resentments arising from the so the first is weaken samayas, negative deeds and obscurations that we cleanse. Then resentments arising from the fouling of hearths. That is a very specific Tibetan kind of sensibility, Tibetan experience. So in Tibetan culture, when you're cooking food in the kitchen and when the food burns, it is said to offend the spirits of well-being of the household, that it will offend them, it will really annoy them. And the burning of food through lack of care, lack of paying attention, causes resentment. That's the word here, kun. It causes resentment. So then we can think a little bit about it, as I say, because we're not Tibetan, so it doesn't come to us so naturally. So what can we think about, why? Why this taboo against accidentally burning food or drink when you're preparing? You can almost see, right? Kind of psychologically, right? I mean, we now live, most of us live in conditions where we don't really think about the lack of food, food scarcity. And so we take food for granted, There's an abundance of food everywhere. So we take it for granted. But for majority of human history, and for so many people alive today, food is a question of, I have it now, I'm not sure about the next meal. And in that sense, lack of mindfulness leading to, food being wasted, burnt, will cause resentment among those spirits or energies that are in our homes, ensuring our health. The potency of the food that we eat can be compromised if we keep wasting food. So this is, for me, one way to understand this resentment arising from the fouling of hearths, stove, kitchen. And defects from resentments, jealousies, the veil of samaya violations, and so forth. So there's some, repetition. And jealousies, that's a terrible, really terrible afflictive emotion, jealousy. We cannot appreciate when we see someone else doing well, someone else having a good time. That can rob us so much of our own happiness. There's a story, right? Anecdote. I don't know if it actually happened. Maybe most of you have read this. There's one very good example of how jealousy obstructs our own happiness. There's like two people bedridden in a hospital room. They're basically bedridden, maybe for the rest of their life. It's a care facility. So one person is next to the window, and this other person doesn't have a window. So the anecdote, the story, the tale goes that the person who doesn't have a window, is asking the person who is next to the window, "What do you see? What do you see?" And so the person next to the window would describe, "Oh, there's a park, there's children playing, and this and that." Before long, the person without the window, basically jealousy took over and started to feel sorry and resentment, like, why am I stuck in, the one without the window, and he gets the window. And so before long, he wishes that this roommate would die, so that he can have that bed and can look out the window. And before long, the roommate passed away. And so then he gets to move over. And then now that he's right next to the window and he looks out, it's basically a wall. The roommate has been entertaining him. All the roommate could see was just a blank wall, a deep, kind of well of wall all the way down, nothing else. So this is, how jealousy, can really obstruct us. On the other hand, how generosity can really give us happiness. You can imagine the roommate, being able to tell what he sees, children, today, today that family is back again, and knowing, how much happiness, he's giving to both himself and his roommate. So 33, all these that displease you, protector and refuge deities and guardian gods, by the power of performing this profound ritual of washing with cleansing smoke, these contaminations, no, you see the word no with the umlaut on the o, no. These contaminations, taints in samaya arisen from confusion, are purified. Negative conditions, obstacles, illnesses, and evil spirits are pacified, and opponents, sorcery, and harm are reversed. And then, with every wish and aspiration fulfilled, with long life, freedom from illness, happiness, and wealth flourishing, and with auspicious goodness prevailing in lands and regions, may we have the causes of attaining unsurpassed awakening. So this last 4 lines is all the good stuff. All the good stuff. The good stuff is only good if they are used for the purpose of fulfilling our commitment to waking up, our commitment to actualizing the 2 bodhicittas. Because all this good stuff can also become fuel for our afflictive emotions. Then all of this good stuff turns into more samsara. Long life can turn into fuel for samsara. Every wish and aspiration fulfilled can turn into fuel for samsara. Freedom from illness can turn into fuel for samsara. Happiness and wealth flourishing can turn into fuel for samsara. Auspicious goodness prevailing in lands and regions can turn into fuel for samsara. Because from one perspective, right? Oh, human beings are doing well. But human beings, we have such limited kind of understanding and view. So that when we were doing well, right, we don't mind sacrificing others, right? I mean, we all do that to all sorts of degrees. Some of us more, some of us less, but basically, So all this good stuff has to be redirected, these resources, towards actualizing bodhicitta. Now, so this is the result, right? This is the result. This is the why we are doing this cleansing, what ultimately needs to be cleansed, right? Then, how do we do this? This is when we go back to further up in the text. So page 29, it says, to you whom humans confess to, protector and refuge deities, we, the unerring patrons, beneficiaries, and our circles confess and cleanse. So basically, one of the most important aspects of how we can cleanse outer, inner, secret contamination is we need to expose. We need to confess. We need to expose. We need to lay bare. We need to see clearly our karmic negative, our kleshas, our confusion, our habitual propensities. So we confess in the Buddhist context. It's not about guilt. It's about laying bare to see clearly. So we ask the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, the protector and refuge deities. Here, protector, we're not talking about Dharmapalas. Here we're talking about, like Buddha as a protector. And Buddhas as those who can ultimately protect us. And so here we say, may the three jewels bear witness, so that we, the patrons, the beneficiaries, here is referring to the religious, the beneficiaries here are referring to the religious people who do practice, do rituals for the patrons. So these two and the circles, we all confess and cleanse. We expose our negative karma of body, speech, and mind, and we make a resolve to be done with that, to be cleansed. So that all negativities arisen from discursive thoughts and dualistic fixation. So here we are given more information. Where does negative karma of body, speech, and mind come from? It comes from discursive thoughts. That means the proliferation of ideas and thoughts and emotions. One leads to another, being dragged around by all of that. Where does that come from? Dualistic fixation. Subject-object dualistic fixation. What is that? I. Once I turns up, you turns up. Then me and mine turns up, you and yours turns up. Then that kind of differentiation leads to all the other things. So here we confess to the objects of refuge. Now, interestingly, in this text, you not only just confess to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, which is more standard Buddhist practice. We confess to the objects of refuge. Here it says, confessing to the waters, where those seen as fish abide, we cleanse. Then confessing to the mountains, where those seen as deer abide, we cleanse. Confessing to you, gods, humans, demons, sun, moon, stars, nagas underground, Zen spirits underground, and to the planets and stars above the ground, we cleanse. You see here, you even confess to inanimate planets and stars above the ground. So this is not saying, you know, like the stars and the sun like go, oh yeah, you're confessing, good boy, good girl. Yeah. But this is saying like, I think this is not so standard, you know, in Buddhist purification practice, like Vajrasattva, 35 Buddhas, you know, you don't confess to, much less to inanimate, you know? You don't confess to like worldly gods and all of that. But in this text, you know, to me, there's something very, very all-encompassing about this, which is to say, we want our conscience to be clear, whether we are standing in front of Buddhas or we are standing in front of the proverbial, even the proverbial Hitler. We want our conscience to be clear, to be free. So that when we face the waters and the fish, when we face the mountains and the deers, when we face the sun and the sky and the stars, no matter what we are in the presence of, our conscience is clear, cleansed. And so we have nothing to hide. Confessing to you, knowing and seeing primordial wisdom deities, we cleanse through the blessings of having confessed and cleansed in this way, and that is where we started. Afflictions, habitual propensities, and faults. So the result is what all we talked about. And most immediately, how do we get to these set of results? We have to lay bare, we have to reveal, we have to confess. And so that's sort of like the inner meaning of the Sang. And then, if you go back to now we go to the very beginning of this text, page 1. That is when we are given 2 sets of details, 2 sets. And today, looking at our time, you know, we are not able to cover it line by line. But two parts basically from the beginning. One is talking about the different types of, maybe more than 2 actually. One is talking about the different types of contaminations. It's a more detailed list of how contaminations, where they come from, and what they are. And so that's the first part. Second part is talking about what are the materials that you can use. What kind of incense, what kind of herbs, what kind of offerings is given in the second. And the third is specifically, what are the different energies, principles, deities, spirits that needs to be cleansed. So 3 parts actually. Yeah. The types of contaminations in a more specific, you know, so it will talk about, you know, all those different types. Like it says, for example, on page 5. The attitude and conduct conditioned by the ways of gods, humans, and demons, thus reconciling them. When gods, humans, and demons are in conflict, this is the means to clear them. When clean and unclean of may and no, may and no, remember at the beginning I talked about, are mixed. So meaning, then this is the means to cleanse them. When accomplishments and obstacles are mixed, so success and failure, this is the means to clear them. When truth and falsity, good and bad, are mixed, this is the means to clear them. When good, bad, and middling are mixed, this is the means to clear them. When there are errors in ritual practice, this is the means to clear them, cleanse them. When gods, humans, and demons create contaminants, this is the means to cleanse them. When there are bad signs and omens in dreams, this is the means to clear them. When signs and astrological calculations are bad, this is the means to clear them. And so it goes on listing all of this. Then on page 13, Emaho, please heed us. We cleanse and offer with Samantabhadra's clouds of offerings. We cleanse with the white sandalwood, Father Juniper. We cleanse with red sandalwood, Mother Cedar. We cleanse with aloes wood, King of Medicines. So here is a list of all the different plants and trees and wood and resins that is used in Tibet. And then after that, it's who are we offering this cleanse to? So it begins on page 15. To the unsurpassed refuge, gurus of the lineage and instructions, we cleanse. For you, perfect Buddhas, supreme among two-legged beings, we cleanse. For you, sacred Dharma jewel, we cleanse. Noble Sangha, we cleanse. So this whole hierarchy of like the enlightened beings all the way down to all different types of beings. So here, one thing I want to say is, when it comes to the enlightened beings and the great bodhisattvas and the great, beings, when we say we offer you this cleanse, it's not that they are contaminated and they need to be cleansed. They're not. It's our relationship to them that has been contaminated, so we cleanse. So that's the meaning. Then when it comes to a list of like what we call worldly gods, so like guardians of hermitages, on page 17, to you gods who are sentries to us, master and disciples, to you gods who are our watchmen at night, to gods who come to our support, all those worldly gods, there we actually cleanse. In part because our actions can create this dripa, this spiritual dirt that afflicts them, that annoys them, that weakens them. So we use this to cleanse. Yeah. So it looks like we have already exceeded our time. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, but I also will say maybe next Sunday we'll have another session, because this is a beautiful text I want to share with you. Maybe you don't have that much time, but I will offer. Next Sunday we will schedule another session and to go through this text. But now let's see if there is questions. Surely there are questions.
I have a question, but I don't know if it's more appropriate for next Sunday.
You can ask now, then I can say, oh, next Sunday or not.
Okay.
And meanwhile, I'm going to demonstrate, so
It says, the 3 plants of the elixir of deathlessness.
Yes.
I was just curious as to what deathlessness refers to in this.
Oh, deathlessness. The elixir of deathlessness, Yeah. So what causes death?
What causes death?
Yeah.
Death of the physical body, aging.
Yeah. So what causes death?
Illness, usually, or accident.
No. Go back. What causes death?
Being
Birth.
born.
Birth.
Birth causes death.
Birth.
Exactly. So deathlessness can only be achieved when we realize the birthless nature. And the birthless nature is the nature of our minds. So the elixir of deathlessness. Yeah? Of course, on the outer level, it's appealing to the mythology of the existence of the fountain of youth, right? Hidden somewhere in the Himalayas. And if you drink from this fountain of youth from Shangri-La, you will live thousands and thousands of years and become the ascended masters that guide people from Atlantis to Mu to wherever else, you know. Maybe, what do I know? But what I do know is, according to the Buddha Dharma, deathlessness is the nature of the mind, which is also birthless. So here, in this case, it's poetic to say that these three plants have the qualities of the elixir, of the nectar of deathlessness. And the three plants, the Artemisia with golden flowers, yeah, junipers that is with turquoise tufts, yeah, tufts of hair, and rhododendrons with conch white flowers. I've shared with some of you to say that there is a specific mountain, specific hill in Drikung Valley where this terma was discovered. There is a specific hill with these exactly, you know, the way that these tree plants grow on this terrain. I realized that during one of my visits to this mountain. As I was walking up, I started to notice, and I remembered this text, that at the foot is the Artemisia, which is like mugwort with golden flowers. Then as you go up, there is these creeping juniper. Their junipers are not tree junipers, they are creeping junipers with these, the green is so dark that they look turquoise. And then on the peak, their rhododendron is not like our rhododendron. The rhododendron, I think they're called dwarf rhododendron. Their leaves are just this long and small flowers, very fragrant rhododendron. So like this, you know, burn little segments, put on the bed of ash, and then with the powdered incense, you sprinkle on top. Just sprinkle a little as you do the practice, and as you continue the practice, you can continue to sprinkle a little. That's one way. But even if this is even too much smoke, then just burn a stick of incense. Most important is visualization-wise, right? There's not, some practice usually don't have, you know, very complicated visualizations at all. In fact, like this sun practice doesn't even say, you know, oh, first imagine yourself as the idam. No, it doesn't do any of that. Right? It goes straight into the practice. And so here, if you want to visualize, you want to think, then you think this smoke, right? This fragrant incense that goes out. Whoever is touched by this incense, whoever smells this incense, whoever sees this incense, whoever hears this offering, any of the five senses that they connect with this offering, may they be freed from suffering. And you think, as this goes out to all beings, known and unknown, seen and unseen, may this, and then this then becomes bodhicitta. This becomes bodhicitta. Other questions? And of course, you know, to call them, to call these three as having the elixir of deathlessness, and there's a reason, because they grow through all the seasons. So they are evergreens of sorts. So no matter what season you go, and it's quite stark, you know, the landscape in central Tibet, the topography, specifically there, you know, not many other things grow. But through all seasons, these three plants are always there. So you can always use them for offering sang. So the local significance of this text, it's amazing, you know, when you're there and doing this practice, you're like, it's here where this term was concealed and later revealed. I don't know when we can travel again, but I was, you know, earlier on, I made the intention of going summer of next year, not this year. So hopefully in 1 year, they can quell this situation. And those of you who want to, you come, you know, we go to Drikung.
Thank you, Dr. Light. No, the awareness that they're evergreen made sense now in that geographical landscape. So makes sense why those three. Thank you.
Yeah, it says verdant and fragrant throughout the 4 seasons. Such are the extraordinary attributes of these excellent plants. Any other questions? Are there any questions on Facebook? I have not looked.
When we do the teaching next weekend, will we have time to actually go through and do the ritual together, chanted?
Oh, we'll have to see, you know. I never know how long the teachings can go. There's recordings of this practice already on you know, Urban Dharma, sometimes done exclusively in English, sometimes done completely in Tibetan, sometimes a mixture of the two. So if you look at the videos that is on the Urban Dharma Facebook page, you can see. Yeah, you can look for this practice.
There's a question on Facebook. Which elements can we use instead? I'm assuming instead of the, which elements can we use instead?
Any kind of incense, you know. Yeah, you know, aromatic smoke. Try to look for evergreen. That's always good. And I think evergreen probably grow anywhere. Yeah. And as Fabiola kindly pointed out on Facebook, Tibetan spirit, of course, carries a lot of these incense in powdered form. Many different types we have. And in stick form as well. Some come from Bhutan, some come from Nepal, some come from Tibet. And then there's this thing called, we sell one thing we call the mother mix. And what the mother mix is, basically, we have gathered together different sang incense from like holy places, and also like with blessing pills and everything. That's some of the best offering things. You also need, actually, according to more detailed texts, it's like the 5 metals, shavings from the 5 metals, like gold, silver, copper, and then precious and semi-precious stones crushed. And all that needs to be mixed into for an ideal sang. So almost in a homeopathic sense, there is all those substances in the mother mix. So there's these pills that you would crush and mix into it that has all the gatherings of hundreds and hundreds of different blessing substances. So we've mixed into the mother mix. And the way you use the mother mix is, you know, you buy a bag of the mother mix, then you buy more general kind of sang powder. and you put a spoonful of the mother mix into the more general, so that the mother mix, in that sense, you know, like a mother culture for your kombucha or your sourdough, you know, you can give other people to mix into, you know, their sang mix. If we don't have more questions for today, then we will end here. Then next Sunday, we will continue. As I say, this is a really beautiful text. I can talk more about, you know, this next time. This is an introduction today. And yes, so, you know, in conclusion, you can burn a lot of things outside and have a big sang offering. You can do a small one with just one stick of incense, even incense with just one, you know, ingredient, saffron or sandalwood or agar wood, you know, just one ingredient. What makes all the difference is bodhicitta. And that's, you know, at the core of what this is. Yeah. Sangchö Sangchö Rinpoche Ma Ge Ba Nam Ge Gyunche Ge Ba Nyam Ba Me Ba Yang Go Ne Gong Du
Thank you.